Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Men's Healing and Recovery Podcast. My name is Ezzy Schusterman, and I'm a certified life and addiction coach. This is a podcast I've wanted to do for a very long time. For the past few years, I've had the honor to counsel many men on their journeys to becoming who they truly want to be. Most of the men I coach just want to feel whole and free to be their truest selves. Some are men in recovery from various addictions, and some have childhood traumas that have led to their current struggles. And many don't have any specific history at all. The common thread, though, that I've found is a desire to belong, feel whole, and accepted. In today's podcast, I speak with my good friend, Sholom Rosenson. Sholom is an NLP coach and the founder of the Inner Wholeness workshop in Jerusalem. Sholom has been on his own journey of healing for the past 12 years and has worked with hundreds of men on their journeys of recovery and wholeness. If there is anything you hear on this podcast, you want to share feedback, have a suggestion for a topic that you'd like to see covered, or just about anything else, please reach out to me at ezzy@bayareafc.org. That's ezzy@bayareafc.org. Enjoy the podcast. Thank you for joining today's first episode of the Jewish Men's Healing Podcast. The goal of this podcast is to share support, guidance, and hope for men who may struggle with their place in life and in the Jewish community, and may struggle with a sense of their masculinity. Additionally, our goal is to encourage all men to realize that they are created whole and they can find a sense of wholeness through support and connection with other men in healthy ways. Today, I am honored to have my dear friend Sholom Rosenson joining us all the way from Israel. Sholom is a certified NLP coach, practitioner, and mentor. NLP stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming Coach and Practitioner, with over 12 years of experience working with clients in workshops in group settings and individually, helping hundreds of men grow in their sense of masculinity, both in the Jewish community and beyond. Most recently, Sholom has been running a workshop called Inner Wholeness that helps men with their growth based on Carl Jung's masculine archetypes of lover, warrior, magician, and king. Sholom, it's an honor to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me. What a great introduction, both to your podcast and to my program.
I've heard wonderful things about it, but we'll get to that soon. But before we get started, please tell me a little bit about yourself and your history that led you to this work around men's health.
Wow, that's a big question. I started what I refer to as my real healing journey about 12 years ago, maybe 13. I'm 40 now, so I was around 27. And that came after years and years of sitting in a therapist's office trying to figure myself out and how to quote unquote get better. And
you think you figured yourself out already?
No, absolutely not. But I've definitely made some headway. I'm definitely on a good path and starting to figure myself out. There are some things that I think I've figured out. I haven't mastered them yet, but I'm getting there maybe. Anyway, growing up was rough. I grew up in a secular home. I'm religious now, living in a ultra-Orthodox Haredi community in Israel. But the environment in my home was very, very challenging. There was alcoholism in my family, and there was abuse, verbal, physical. It was rough. And that's the tip of the iceberg. And I ended up with some really unhealthy beliefs, some really unhealthy behaviors, a lot of fear. I was shy and introverted. I'm still introverted, but I'm not so shy anymore. And I spent so many years sitting in a chair across from a therapist, just trying to work it out and understand what was going on inside of me. And about 12 years ago, I discovered the world of workshops where people go away for these experiences, and it was just so incredibly different. And I latched onto it with both hands. It's become a huge part of my life. Like you mentioned in my intro, I've been involved in, I don't know, probably around 50 workshops. I've led them, I've started to write them, I've helped write pieces for other people's workshops. And it's been really, really rewarding. I've found myself a part of a community of people that are involved in what we refer to as men's work, where we push each other. We push each other to figure it out, man, to be a better man, to go deep. It's like an invitation. It's an invitation to go deep, which unfortunately I don't find so much in the world of men today out there in the world, other than in these circles, this invitation to go deep, to use an emotional language where I can really share what's going on.
It's fascinating to hear this, to hear your past and how it led you to where you are today. Are you saying that men's healing is something that everyone should be going through? Because it doesn't sound it sounds like trauma work or your childhood work is the men's healing work.
I'm pretty sure it was Rabbi Twersky, and I apologizing if I'm misquoting Rabbi Twersky, but I'm pretty sure it was him who said, there are two types of people in this world, those who are in therapy and those who should be in therapy.
We had a swarm of termites last week, and I was speaking to a realtor, and she said to me, there's two types of homes in California: homes that have termites or homes that will have termites. So it sounds like like the same thing. There's men that need to be in therapy and men that are in therapy, but everybody needs some form of therapy.
We either have problems or we're going to have problems.
Yeah. Another question I had on what you were saying is, do you think that, sharing your story, you talk a lot about having, trauma, alcoholism. Do you think that all men in their lives need to have some sort of trauma, some sort of extreme thing for them to work? What if I'm just a regular guy who says, my life is good, everything is fine? Is that possible?
I mean, it's definitely possible that someone could say his life is good and everything's fine. In theory, we've all been through some kind of trauma. It's not necessarily something huge, but just being born into this world is a trauma. Just having our parents tell us that we can't have another cookie is a trauma when we're that young. We throw fits in our terrible twos because things are dramatic to us. So we've all been through some kind of trauma, but it's not always so dramatic. It's not always so far-reaching that because of those things, we end up with problems in adulthood. But that being said, there's always work to be done. There's always something that can make us stronger, to be fortified for the journey, for the road ahead. So I think that even though not everyone needs this necessarily deep, intense trauma work, I think there's what to be learned. There's what to benefit from being involved in it or exposed to it.
Yeah, told this to me, but I was said everybody seems to have it worked out until you get to know them. And once you get to know somebody, you know that they have a history of their own. But until you get to know them, everything is perfect in their lives. And I think that we all have work that we need to work on.
Man, is that true?
Yeah. When people struggle with their masculinity, what before we get to what the struggles are, how would you describe a healthy man or healthy masculinity?
I think that's very, very. It's like an intimate question for each individual, that everyone really gets to define that for himself. But I think that if I were to begin to try, at least for myself, it has to do with being present, not being stuck in the past or always focused on the future. really here and now, whether that be with pain or pleasure, meaning if I'm going through something, I'm not running away from it. I think that's true strength. I think that's being truly powerful to be able to be present with what is, even if it's something outside of me. It's one of my kids going through it, through pain, or through something really, really difficult, and not trying to fix it, because that's seen as a masculine trait nowadays, being Mr. Fix It. And there's a lot of people that consider it to be a toxic masculine trait, to not be able to be present with what is and to always be trying to fix. So in my map of masculinity, that's something that makes a man more focused, more powerful, more present. That presence, that not needing to change anything, just being able to be there with it. What else? I mean, there are things that are important to me, like providing for my family and creating a home for them. But to define masculinity for everyone else, I'm not even going to try to do.
So many of us have gone through the 12-step programs in different ways, and when I think of the summary of getting to healthy masculinity, I think of the step where surrender being a step towards healthy masculinity. That as long as we're in control and we think that we have it all worked out, we're never going to get to healthy masculinity. Once we surrender and realize, hey, I don't have control over all this. I'm just doing the best I can, but I'm dedicated to doing the best I can. That's when we get to healthy masculinity. I know for myself as a kid growing up, I used to look, and I grew up in a religious home, and pretty much the environment that I was surrounded was a religious environment, and I always looked up to the guys in the yeshiva that had success in their learning, success in doing programs, and in my mind that was healthy masculinity, because these are guys who are the successful ones, the ones who accomplish things, the ones who are recognized, the ones who are doing things that, in the Chabad world, doing mitzvahim, going out, putting on film people. And for me, that just wasn't my strong suit. And it wasn't something that if anything, I was afraid of it. I was scared of it. And learning to embrace myself, how I was and how I am, was a huge step in my healing, because I had to embrace that I'm going to be a loving person and I'm going to be a kind person. I'm not going to be the stereotypical masculine guy that the yeshiva system had portrayed masculinity to be. And I think that for what you were saying about being present, being there, being involved with your family, being able to provide for your family, doesn't mean that if somebody can't provide for their family, they're not healthy, a healthy man either. But if they're there and dedicated, I think that brings a huge amount of a huge sense of masculinity to them. Do you feel that that there's a bigger challenge of masculinity nowadays? In the secular world, there's a lot of talk about the Me Too movement and men being less than and blah 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 blah, things of that sort. Do you find that to be an issue in the religious community, or do you see that as just the secular world, and men in today's community, in the frum community, don't have such struggles?
Oh, I absolutely think these struggles have reached the frum community. I was actually having a conversation recently with a woman that works with women here in Jerusalem, victims of abuse. She works with empowerment, and she talks about how women are being erased. And she's always showing like magazines of families where the woman is blurred out. Women are being erased from religious society. And as much as I hear that, and maybe that's a huge problem, it is a huge problem in a way. I told her the same thing's happening to men. Our contribution is no longer being recognized in so many facets of human existence. Like dads have been reduced to salaries to what they bring into their home. When it comes to the emotional support of the children, people are looking to the mother. Oh, I'll call her mother. Her mother will know what to do. Her mother will know how to make an appointment with the doctor. His mother will know how to take care of this and that and the other thing. And fathers are just kind of being erased from their place in what's happening in family life. And not only that, with with everything that's happening around emotional experience, men are expected to be the backbone, to have a backbone, to be strong and powerful and have it together. And men are also having an emotional experience. We're also human beings, but we're not being taught that emotional language a lot of the time. We're not being taught to express emotions, or we might even be taught that boys don't cry, or boys don't have emotions, or man up, or hold it together, or be strong. And these things are becoming like taskmasters over our heads, telling us that we have to have it together all of the time. So masculinity, authentic, real masculinity, where we get to show up and be present and be a part of what's going on and process our own stuff, because we also have stuff going on beneath the surface. It's been taken away from us. It's kind of been swept under the rug or put into the shadows. Men don't do those things. And as a result, I think a lot of men are really in crisis without proper avenues for figuring their stuff out. They're in crisis.
I remember the first time I cried after I got married. I remember the shame I had that, here I am. My uncle had just passed away, and I was very close with him. And I remember the shame I was having internally. And my wife is telling me, like, it's okay. You just had a trauma. Thank God I have a supportive wife. And here I am feeling like, wait, I'm a man. I'm not supposed to cry. Or if I'm going to cry, I'm supposed to cry in private. Nobody's supposed to see it. And society doesn't tell us that men are human. Men have feelings. Men are allowed to be emotional. Men are allowed to fall apart. And knowing that it's okay to just be you, be your authentic self, is something that we don't get nowadays. At least society doesn't give us nowadays. But these men's groups do provide this. So I'll use that as a segue to tell me a little bit about what these men's workshops do and how they help men with healing and masculinity.
Actually, you really sparked something within me I'm going to share before I answer that question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Growing up, my grandfather was he was a big guy, and I saw him as very, very powerful. And my father also was tall and burly, and he had a very physical job, and he was very rough and tumble, and they referred to us as Rosenson bulls. Like we kind of like plow through, we get the job done, we do what needs to be done, we're these powerful warriors. Grr. And that was the image of masculinity that I grew up with. So anything that kind of pushed up against that image of what a man is supposed to be, I thought meant that there was I thought it wasn't okay. And not only that, I thought it meant there was something wrong with me. So yeah. I'll use that as a segue into talking about groups. These groups are a really special place for people to come together.
Before you talk about the groups, if you don't mind talking about the individual, what is...
Great. I think that one of the things that you mentioned before from the 12 steps, you talked about surrender. I think that's a huge part of it. Part of surrender is being present with what is. It's kind of surrendering all of my preconceived notions and my ideas that I had going into it. It's letting go of all of those things that tell me I need to be a Rosenson bull, or men don't do that, or that if I do such and such, it says something about me. So surrender is definitely a huge part of it. Wow, on a personal level, recognizing the difference between what is and the stories that I told myself. Like between what's really true, what's a fact, what's factual here and now that I can see with my own eyes, and all of those things that I believe to be true. Because a lot of the times the things that we believe to be true are false, where we make mistakes. We come up with these ideas that whether or not we know where we came up with them from, they're just not expanding us. They're not making us feel better about ourselves or helping our growth and development. They're keeping us stuck. And a lot of times these are false beliefs. They're false ideas. There are so many things, and it really depends on the situation that a person's in, but sometimes it's just that. It's about the situation that a person's in, or the places where he's stuck, about getting himself out of those places where he's stuck, and either getting sober or setting up accountability or making a change or changing the people you're friends with, or showing up differently, or setting aside time for myself. For everyone, it's really going to be very, very different. But it's a recognition of the way it is not necessarily the way it's meant to be.
Would you say that perhaps the summary of healthy masculinity is accepting what is, and allowing a process to happen? Okay, I may not like where I am right now. I may have a vision of where I want to go, but doesn't make me or where I am right now bad. And if I can't get to where I want to go, doesn't make me a failure. And
Yes.
that is healthy masculinity, is embracing yourself.
Yes. Just because I accept where I am right now, or accept what is right now, doesn't mean it's all good and perfect. It doesn't mean it's as good as it can be. If I accept myself with my chesronos, with all of those things that make me imperfect, that doesn't mean that I don't continue to work toward perfection or toward being better. It doesn't mean it's all okay, but it means it is what it is right now. And I'm going to grow from this point, from where I am right now. Because as long as I'm denying it or running from it or not recognizing it in any way, so then I can't grow from where I am right now, because I'm not recognizing it. I'm not accepting it, or I'm not accepting who I am in this moment.
You said
that's
something
that's a really
Go
important
ahead.
distinction, is accepting where I am right now doesn't mean everything's perfect. It doesn't mean I accept all of my downfalls and my chesronos and all of the things that I need to work on. But I do.
If I could say it a little differently, it doesn't mean that you accept that they are there. Doesn't mean you're going to have to live with them and you have to stick with them.
Right.
Something you said before about the stories we have in our head. I remember I participated once in a workshop, and they asked everybody, before we start, is there anyone here that you're bothered by, that's going to prevent you from doing the work? And I remember there was one guy there in the room that it bothered me how confident he was and how put together he was, and he knew what he wanted. He had his life all worked out, or so it seemed. And so they had me stand across from him and asked me a couple things. What do I know about this guy? And in reality, I knew nothing about him. And then he told me about his life, how he was divorced, and he had no relationship with his children, and this was a mess and that was a mess, and he doesn't know where he's living. And I realized that so much is a picture we paint in our head of how things need to be and how things are, when in reality, that none of that is reality. In reality, none of that's reality. And reality is what we make of our current situation.
Absolutely. A lot of times on workshops like these, they bring out things just like that really early, before you get to know people, just in order to help you recognize that you're telling yourself all of these stories, and we all are. We kind of use our judgments to fill in the gaps when we don't know something.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me a little bit about the workshops that you're currently running and how they help men with their struggles.
Oh, okay. So inner wholeness is something that I developed with a friend of mine during during this period of COVID, when all of my men's circles fell apart. All of my in-person men's circles fell apart. So we decided we wanted to develop something that we would run via Zoom. And I presented the idea of doing something around the masculine archetypes, which is an idea that was put together by Carl Jung. And my friend countered that we'll do that, but we're going to do them as they relate to the four elements. So here we have the lover and water and the warrior and fire and the magician and air and the king and earth. We have these four energies and these four elements that make up all of us. And they make up all of us. It doesn't matter if you're religious or non-religious. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish or Christian. It doesn't matter if you're living in Asia or the United States. And we've done this with people from different continents. And we found that even though our manifestations of these energies are different, that everyone we work with can relate to these four energies. I wanted it to be experiential. I didn't want it to be these long, like TED Talks. I didn't want it to be a long PowerPoint presentation. I wanted people to have interaction, to feel connected, and to have an emotional, experiential experience being on these calls with us. And that's what we managed to develop to a very surprising degree. That was the feedback we got from the people on these calls. And the attempt, and we've found much success with it, is to expose people to these four elements, or these four energies within each of us: the lover, the warrior, the magician, and the king, to really teach people about how they can show up, how they can drive us and manifest in our lives. And each of us are going to relate to different energies naturally. We're all kind of drawn into different areas. So there are places where people feel very, very much connected. Yeah, that's my energy. I got that. I'm right there with you. I know exactly what it is that you're talking about. And then there are the other ones where people are feeling really dry. And as we're talking, we're kind of like a deer in the headlights. They don't get it. I don't resonate with this energy at all. Or some places where people are even afraid of them. So in those cases, we try to kind of clean up the preconceived notions of what people think these energies are. We give them an opportunity to understand the highs of that energy, where they're in wholeness, where they're having really positive influences on our lives, and where each of these energies may negatively influence our lives, where they may cause us a lot of chaos or turmoil. And in giving people the tools to have a very positive experience with each energy, which they do during the week between sessions, we have take-home materials and ways for them to really connect to each energy in between sessions. We kind of open up their eyes to maybe this whole realm of existence, of experience that they hadn't tapped into before. And to live as a whole healthy male, we all actually need access to all four of these elements, to all four of these energies. So if I'm completely shut down from one of them, it's going to get in the way at some places in my life. So as these guys, as I have cleanly connected to each of these energies, it's opened up opportunities for a really new experience. It helps connect in deeper ways. It helps make boundaries where I need to make boundaries. It helps me give myself honoring where I deserve to be recognized for the things that I'm good at and things that I do. And ultimately, it helps us create boundaried, healthy, safe spaces in our lives that bless us and others. So that's in a nutshell what we're doing in Inner Wholeness.
It sounds fascinating. It's, you know, so if I'm summarizing what you're saying, that there's four masculine archetypes, and I've heard about the masculine archetypes. I'm going to ask you a question about in a second, but to summarize, there's four masculine archetypes, and we have all four of these. Some of us haven't been able to tap into them for whatever reason, and as we tap into our true masculine archetypes, we begin to live in our inner wholeness, as your group is called, and we live free. If I remember correctly, when I had learned about these archetypes, there's also shadow archetypes of these, that each of these have the shadow or the negative side of it, and essentially we're all living, you know, we're all living with these archetypes. The only question is whether we're living them in the whole way or in the broken way. And it seems like the goal is to shift over from the shadow or from the dark side of it into the wholeness and to the joy of it. Well, if I wasn't living in California, I would definitely join the truth is I could even join if I'm in California now that it's on Zoom.
You absolutely could.
Well, I'm going to ask you at the end how people can join in. You'll tell us where people can, or maybe just share it here, and then at the end we'll ask again.
Sure. Right now we don't have our own web page, but we have a page on Facebook. You can look up Inner Wholeness Workshop on Facebook, or you can reach out to me directly at Sholom Rosenson, SHOLOM Rosenson, ROSENSON @gmail.com.
And I'll put it in the description at the
Great.
end as well. Okay, knowing what you know at this point in your life, you know, and you said 12 years ago you got involved in this. Let's say you're talking to Sholom 12 years ago, or maybe Sholom 24 years ago. What would you tell yourself, and how would you jumpstart the process back then? Let's say somebody doesn't have access to all the resources that you're providing, but they want to begin doing work. What would you suggest?
It's such a hard question because I don't know that I would have been ready for it, but there are definitely things that I needed to hear. One is that it wasn't your fault. I don't know that that's vastly connected to what we're talking about, but that's definitely something that I needed to hear as a kid, that it wasn't my fault. And if I would have listened, which I'm not sure I would have 24 years ago to anyone older than me, I think that being exposed to this kind of work that has been a saving grace for me would have been beneficial had I discovered it earlier. This experiential work where I get to recognize in a very physical way, through connection to my breath, through my connection to my body, that my thoughts are not me. They are something outside of me. And I think that realization was my starting point when I finally saw all of that stuff that I'd been telling myself for so long outside of myself. When I got to put it on a table across from me and look at it and say, what have I been doing? And maybe that would have helped.
What you're doing is something that I would have benefited from as a kid, even as a teenager, maybe not as a kid, as a teenager, as an adult, but I didn't know about such things. And even if I knew about, go ahead.
Well, do you want to share with me, with your listeners, how you got involved in all this?
Sure. Thanks for asking. I got involved in this. My mother passed away when I was 7 years old. And that impacted my life in a way that, I mean, you can only imagine a 7-year-old losing a mother. You know, I'm one of 11 children, so I'm a part of a large family. And when you go through this trauma of losing a mother and trying to find your place within a large family, and then that spilling over to finding your place in school because you're dealing with the loss of a mother and people not understanding that, and then you go off to yeshiva, and I was constantly in an environment of people that didn't or maybe people understood, but people that didn't come across to me that people understood who I was and the struggles I was going through. And I had a lot of people telling me, "Oh, you're so sweet, you're so kind, you're so this, you're so that." But that was external things. That wasn't who I was. And for the most part, people didn't understand, at least to me, it didn't appear to understand my internal struggles. And and only later, much later, even after I got married, did I finally truly begin to address being authentic and being who I am, largely because I had my wife who was able to see who I was and see that I was struggling with who I was, and said,
Wow.
Really, like, if I can embrace you, why can't you embrace you? And that led me to doing doing a lot of men's healing work, and eventually growing in essentially embracing myself, embracing who I am, all the gifts that I have, and then helping other people in the process. And had I had this type of environment as a kid, and again, as kids, we all have a lot of things, but even as a teenager, if I was 15, 16 years old in yeshiva, and it was a setting where it was like, hey guys, we're going to go now to this group where you can be authentic, you can say what you're struggling with, you can say who you can talk about who you are. It would have been like this huge weight lifted off my shoulders where I can just be me. But I didn't know that such things existed, and I didn't even know that even if it existed, that it was okay for me. And knowing that there's groups out there like this, like what you're doing, whether it's in person, whether it's on Zoom, is such a it's such a breath of fresh air. Knowing that there's places where people can be authentic and be who they are, and just be free, and no one's going to judge you. And having that opportunity allows you to, just fly and do, accomplish so much. So thank you for the amazing work you're doing. If somebody is looking for things in their community, what sort of things? Maybe they're not ready to join a healing group, but one of the thoughts that I'm hearing from what you're saying is just join a men's group, whether it's a group from your shul, whether it's a group from go play sports with some guys, and just find a group of people where you can be authentic and you can be you, and they're not going to judge you, and go to a place and be you. A lot of times we're afraid of what's going to happen. And when we finally be ourselves for, once, people actually, they'll come over to you later and they say like, wow, you're such an awesome guy. And you're like, oh my gosh, it was the first time I was being myself. And you were afraid that they're going to run away from you. So
Yeah.
I'm hearing from what you're saying that this is the type of thing to do.
I think so. There is access to men's group all over the place, all different types of men's groups that don't necessarily deal with any particular thing. But one of the common denominators of these places is that they're groups of men that are looking for a more expressive or authentic, as you said it, space. And there doesn't need to be deep emotional work in these spaces either. Going and playing ball, going to a gym, going to a sauna, going to a pool, going hiking, having a barbecue. These are all ways that men connect. But the other suggestion that I make to people is to kind of slip some emotional language in there a little bit, as opposed to, hey, how you doing? Baruch Hashem. Okay, great. Take care. Answer the question, how you doing? Maybe throw in an emotion word once in a while. I'm feeling I'm feeling really happy. I'm feeling really sad. I'm feeling really nervous right now, afraid or ashamed or whatever. Try to slip it in and see how people react. And you might be surprised that they start sharing more back to you and you create these deeper relationships. And the other thing that I suggest to people is when it comes to anyone that you're close with or anyone in your family, try to stop using the words okay and fine.
Great.
And you'll see how much it opens you up, and maybe even opens them up. And not everyone's going to be ready, but they may surprise you.
That's great. I'm smiling because when I walk down the street and somebody says, good morning, hey, how you doing? I'm the only nut who actually responds and says, I'm doing fine. And they're like already down the block. And my wife's like, they weren't even interested. But what you're saying is, take an interest, and share. And you'd be surprised how once you share, how many people share back in return as well.
Yeah, and invite that.
Yeah.
If you ask people how they're doing and they say Baruch Hashem, you can say, I know, Baruch Hashem, I agree, but how you doing?
Beautiful. Any parting words, parting thoughts that you would want the listeners to hear?
Yeah, absolutely. The friend of all of these ways of being that keep us stuck, that keep us from really showing up and creating connection are loneliness and shame. And those are two really common themes in the world today, and they're killers. A lot of people are living with loneliness and shame, and they don't know how to break out of it. And these connections, trying them on, trying them out, figuring out where to develop them, and taking a chance, they are the way to break the cycle, because we can't break the cycle of shame or loneliness when we stay by ourselves.
So open up and share. That's the key. Well, thank you, Sholom, so much for joining me today and sharing your wisdom. I know I've learned a lot from you over the years, as I'm sure many others will as well and have. And I have no doubt many people are inspired and will be inspired by your words. As you said before, if somebody wants to join your program or find out more, they can go on Facebook and search for Inner Wholeness.
Inner Wholeness Workshop. Yep.
Inner Wholeness Workshop. And if they, I know you do private coaching as well, so if they want to reach out to you, they can email sholomrosenson@gmail.com.
That's me.
Did I say that right? Rosenson.
Yep. 2 O's in Rosenson.
Beautiful. Well, thank you very much. And this has been an honor for me, and I look forward to talking more in the future.
Oh, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.